right, so I'm not going to hide the lead on this one. We're going to be talking about the LA fires today. Is it a conspiracy theory, incompetence? No matter what, I think it's evident that if you live in California, you need to get out immediately. Let's dig into all the components that made these fires completely devastating. So first, I think the best place to start is with the most highly controversial fish in the history of the United States, and that's the Delta Smelt. If you've heard Trump talk about it, he likes to blame it for California's water problems, but I think you'll see it's not solely taking the blame on this one. But the problem with it is that this is a fish that hasn't even been seen in the wild since 2016. However, it is used as an example for an argument that diverts water from 35 million California residents directly into the ocean. The next water issue, if you will, comes from Stuart and Lydia Resnick. They are two billionaires who own roughly 60% of California's water and use roughly 150 billion gallons each year for water-intensive crops that make up only about 2% of California's total GDP. This infrastructure that they actually use was also built using hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars. The next huge problem, no water in the fire hydrants. There were still 3 1 million gallon tanks supplying water, which ran dry 3 different times during the attempted firefighting efforts. Rick Caruso, who lost to current mayor of LA, Karen Bass, he criticized the management and called for investigations, while state and local officials claimed that water distribution choices were somehow not behind the fire hydrant problems, nor was a lack of water in the region. However, there was a 117 million gallon reservoir that was empty and had been undergoing repairs for an entire year, despite California Senator Adam Schiff claiming that it was operational, which has left multiple sources confused why the repairs are taking so long. And how about the water chief, Janice Quinones, who makes roughly $750,000 a year? She knew about the empty reservoir and broken fire hydrants months before the deadly wildfires. And a source within the LA Fire Department said, had it not been closed, talking about the reservoir, they probably would have been okay and had enough water for the fire. And just as a side note, her job before this, she actually held a top executive role with PG&E, which is an electric company that was linked to fire scandals and previously went bankrupt over liability for several California wildfires. And here's a quick little video just to illustrate how cool Janice truly is.
This is, you call it powered by equity, and I know that it's been really important for the DWP to put an equity lens on everything.
Yes. Yeah. And that's the number one thing that attracted me to this role. Coming from the communities that I come, seeing what I've seen through my career in utilities and through the military. I've been in the Coast Guard 19 and a half years now, so I got 6 more months to qualify for my 20 years, which was my original goal.
Wow. Congratulations. Thank you for your service.
Thank you. It's important to me that everything we do, it's with an equity lens and social justice and making sure that we right the wrongs that we've done in the past from an infrastructure perspective.
Too bad bringing diversity and equity couldn't prepare you for those fires. The next issue is actually that during COVID, LA Fire Department actually fired 100 firefighters because of their COVID vaccine status. This is pretty self-explanatory, but the city placed 108 firefighters who had not complied with the city's vaccine mandate on leave without pay. I think an additional 100 firefighters might have come in handy during this crisis, especially if LA Fire Department hadn't donated equipment to Ukraine in March of 2022. The regional fire departments were sending what was termed extra equipment to the Ukraine weeks after it was invaded by Russia. This included hoses, nozzles, turnouts, helmets, body armor, and personal protective equipment. And this is especially insane when taken in contrast with firefighters using canvas bags to carry water to try and put out fires.
Oh, the building.
And circling back to diversity, equity, and inclusion, the LA Fire Department made a point to focus on hiring diverse applicants instead of the most qualified. This has sparked even worse backlash after a bizarre video surfaced in which Christine Larson appears to defend DEI hiring by blaming victims. While defending the department's DEI hiring practices, Deputy Chief Christine Larson addressed accusations that female firefighters aren't strong enough to carry a man out of a burning building, and in retrospect, this hasn't aged well.
Is she strong enough to do this? Or you couldn't carry my husband out of a fire. Which my response is, he got himself in the wrong place if I have to carry him out of a fire.
Maybe you should have spent more time hiring capable firefighters instead of ones that look like the person they're saving. On top of that, funding for the city's fire department was decreased by $17.6 million, which the fire chief stated directly correlated to their inability to properly fight the fires, specifically by reducing the amount of mechanics, leading to what has gone viral now is photos and videos of hundreds of fire engines being sidelined and inoperable. There were also reports that Los Angeles fire bosses deployed just a fraction of its firefighters and trucks to the deadly Palisades fire until it was already out of control, sending just 5 of the 40 available fire engines and holding back 1,000 firefighters. Another issue that has made this situation significantly worse is that California put a cap on how much insurance companies can charge, leading to thousands of cancellations of fire protection 6 months before the fire started. This led to insurers choosing not to renew thousands of home insurance policies in Pacific Palisades, Altadena, and other fire-prone areas. The rising cost and cancellations left many fire victims without adequate means to cover their losses. To illustrate just how insane this is, one resident went to renew his homeowner's policy from Farmers Insurance for his Pacific Palisades home and was going to have to increase his payment from $4,500 to $18,000 annually. The state's largest home insurer, State Farm General, announced in March that it would not renew 30,000 homeowner and condominium policies, including 1,626 in Pacific Palisades when they expired. It seems like insurance companies knew how mismanaged this whole situation was before anyone in California's government could figure it out. California also rolled out their own plan to provide fire coverage specifically for this reason. However, this only covered homes worth less than $3 million, which is woefully inadequate for many properties in the affected areas. So they probably did not qualify and did not have this coverage. Another big problem is that 4 fires started in different locations within a couple days period. These were the Palisades, Eaton, Hearst, and Otto fires. But how did they start? Although investigations are underway, arsonists have been caught trying to start fires. And this is just one example, but in this instance that I highlight here, a group of Los Angeles residents confronted and apprehended a man they believe may be an arsonist responsible for setting one of multiple wildfires. He was confronted by a resident while apparently holding a porch head and a yellow fuel tank. Los Angeles police took him into custody after a group of Good Samaritans placed him under citizen's arrest near the Kenneth fire. However, police later said he was charged with a probation violation, but is not suspected of lighting any fires, so they let him go. This is just one of many videos recently surfacing, including homeless individuals starting fires in urban areas as well. The next interesting development on the DEI front is LA's mayor, Karen Bass, who is on a trip to Ghana for the African nation's presidential inauguration. She's been ripped for being absent during the crisis as she campaigned on a promise not to go abroad during her tenure as mayor. And more fuel has been added to the fire as an old tweet has reemerged showing her criticizing Senator Ted Cruz for not being in town during the freeze crisis that happened in Texas years before and calling to kick him out of office. And to further illustrate the total incompetence of Bass, enjoy this clip of her completely stonewalling a reporter, asking her about her trip to Ghana and the LA fires.
Do you owe citizens an apology for being absent while their homes were burning? Do you regret cutting the fire department budget by millions of dollars, Madam Mayor? Have you nothing to say today?
Can you back up, boss? Appreciate it.
Have you absolutely nothing to say to the citizens today? Elon Musk says that you're utterly incompetent. Are you considering your position? Madam Mayor, have you absolutely nothing to say to the citizens today who are dealing with this disaster? No apology for them? Do you think you should have been visiting Ghana while this was unfolding back home? Madam Mayor, let me ask you just again, have you anything to say to the citizens today as you return?
No. They're gonna come.
Ma'am, hold on 1 second.
Madam Mayor, just a few words for the citizens today as you return to deal with the catastrophe.
Can you take this down?
So now let's pivot to reasons people think this could have been intentional. Probably the most popular reason mentioned is that LA has an active proposal to become a smart city by 2028. I understand how some people could come to this conclusion, as if you have spent any time in Los Angeles, you would know that most of the city is not even remotely in a place to become a smart city. There's a bunch of old buildings, it's cramped, it's just not there. So how would this even be possible? Well, the theory is a massive land grab created by burning the city to the ground with citizens who do not have fire coverage and must sell off their land because they cannot afford to rebuild their houses. Now, I'm not particularly convinced about this argument for the smart city though, because if you look at other initiatives California has had, they're just pie in the sky dreams for the state. Like, take for example, all cars being mandated to be electric by 2035 without actually making real progress towards building infrastructure like building new power plants. There's just no path to realistically achieve this. It's something that sounds nice on paper, but California already has struggles with the amount of power in its grid. And by every person having an electric car, that's just not possible. However, there is one argument that I'm a little bit more sympathetic towards. And that's that the Olympics are going to be held in LA in 2028. The exact same argument I just made for the smart city could be applied here, but instead, The goal is to clear the land for infrastructure to be built to be able to accommodate a large influx of visitors coming to stay in LA, as well as making room for any additional sporting venues that need to be built. Also, to add fuel to the fire, enjoy an interview with Governor Gavin Newsom, where he does this weird shimmy dance and seems very excited when talking about bringing in developers to talk about next steps in regards to rebuilding LA.
We're dealing with a myriad of issues. I was just talking to Josh Green, the governor of down in Hawaii, who had some ideas around some land use concerns he has around speculators coming in, buying up properties, and the like. So we're already working with our legal teams to move those things forward, and we'll be presenting those in a matter of days, not just weeks.
Another topic I want to cover is that of climate change, and I basically just have two graphs that I find very interesting. The first is the historic chart graphing the average temperature of the Earth over the past 500 million years. Now, I'm not an expert in reading graphs, but it looks like we actually are at the lowest point on this graph. And what I infer from this is that the actual ability for the planet to sustain significantly higher temperatures while supporting life is not even a question. And that's not to say that humans do not have an impact on the climate at all. But when you look at a chart like this, historically, the Earth has been much warmer, and we're actually at the coolest point in the last 500 million years. The next graph I also think is important to the climate change argument is this one, which highlights the average rainfall in LA. Again, I'm not very good at reading graphs, but it looks to me like the average rainfall has been the exact same in LA since 1877. Yes, the population may have grown, putting more stress on the resources, along with a bunch of short-sighted policy changes. However, the rainfall has not changed because of human influence. I think these graphs accurately portray my feelings about the climate change argument. And to prove I'm not being biased, there were actually two narratives that I heard while doing research for this video, which I learned were untrue. So I just want to cover those here because I think it's important. The first was that fire trucks and firefighters from Oregon and Washington were being held up in Sacramento for smog emissions and were not being allowed to go to LA. The reality is, vehicles were simply inspected for glaring problems, which would compromise the safety of the personnel, which makes sense given the long miles which these vehicles are driven to get down to LA, which would not be typical for these types of fire trucks. You know, they normally stay in the city in which they're fighting the fires. And the average inspection time was actually only 45 minutes. As far as I can tell, the most generous interpretation is that someone probably mistook the article that I have on the screen now, which is an actual report that 2 fire trucks broke down on their way to help and had to return to the original city after being repaired because they just weren't necessary any longer. The other story I was looking into was that fire lines were no longer being maintained because of a field mouse's migratory patterns. I couldn't find anything on that, but I did see articles that controlled burns were being promoted to thin underbrush for a species of mouse to allow it to thrive and grow, which kind of seems like the opposite of what I was told and actually would help with fire maintenance. I hope these examples will illustrate the fairness and impartial nature which I try to approach my videos with and help reinforce how I think everyone should look at things that they hear in their lives. So what is the final conclusion? Is it conspiracy theory, incompetence? I honestly don't think it matters. Whatever it was or is, I would advise everyone to get out as soon as possible. This is literally the advice I would provide to any friend or family member who lives in the state. It is a terrible tragedy that through at least incompetence and at worst malice has left over 10,000 residents homeless through a comedy of errors that many, including insurance companies, were able to identify major problems with. However, the elected officials were not. And with that, if you've learned anything from this video, I hope you'll consider dropping me a subscription so you'll know when I release new videos. Thank you for your time, and I'll see you in the next one.